Hi, welcome back to In Studio, our Women in Sport edition. Today we have Soraya Toppin-Herbert in with us, and I'm going to throw it over to her to introduce herself.
All right, introducing myself. Let me see. So Soraya Toppin-Herbert. I'm a family person at heart. I love spending time with my family, which is very ironic because I feel like I don't spend a lot of time with my family since I'm overseas a lot. I love football. I love watching football. And then I'm very passionate about youth development, especially girls, female empowerment. So that's pretty much the synopsis of who I am without kind of going into what I do. I feel it's two different things.
Fair. That's very fair. You are a national football player with our senior women team, the Lady Tridents. Tell us, how did you get involved in football?
So I started playing football over 20-something years ago. It feels pretty old now.
Aging yourself.
Aging myself now. But my first entry into football was actually my older brother, Ariel. He was like, you should come try football. And I went out and I went at Sorayas soccer school, at the time it was professional soccer school. And I went to a session and I just fell in love with it. I was about 6, I think, at the time. And obviously it was just boys and me. And I never felt like I was an outlier. It just felt like we were all just kids playing. So that was my first entry in. And from that point until now, I've been in love with it.
You mentioned that it was just you were the only girl. At that point in time, football, ladies football, women football, it wasn't big in Barbados. Was that at any point a deterrent? How were you able to cope with that?
I wouldn't say it was a deterrent. I think because of my background. So my dad, he's ran football clubs. He's been involved with football. My mom's managed football teams, even at the club level. So I've always been around football. So it never felt like something that was like strange for me to be doing. So even though there weren't necessarily a lot of girls, and then a couple of years like Alyssa Yard and Gabrielle Lopez, like we played at the same club. So saw a couple more females, but it never felt like it wasn't a deterrent not having it. I would say probably at that time, female football itself was non-existent. That didn't exist until I got into secondary school, where we had the women's league started. I think that was about 2005. So for majority of about 10 years, probably not that much, I dated myself a little bit, probably a little bit less than that, I was playing with boys. But I never felt like I was out of place. I think, remember when I took West Stars to the final. Not I took West Stars. When we made the finals at the Barbados tournament, and I was the captain. And that was like, I guess, the first time where I started to hear a lot more the public's viewpoint on not only a girl playing with boys, but a girl captaining boys. And actually on that team was Shanice Stevenson as well, who plays in the national team. That we went to school together and we played together. And we actually had a couple more girls. We had one more girl on the team as well. So, but that was the first time I think I took notice of people's comments of, oh, what you're doing is not traditional. Like it just was going over my head until that point. And then again in secondary school, Queen's College, we made it to the 14 finals. Again, I was a captain. I actually ended up playing against my brother in the finals. He was at Parkinson. And again, that's when it started to hear a lot more about the rhetoric on the public because it was on the radio stations and stuff. And I guess, as I said before, because of my family dynamic and having kind of been brought up in the game, it never really was something that I spent a lot of time thinking about. It's something now, obviously, as I get older, that I'm very much more aware of. But I would say kudos to my parents and kudos to Sorayas and actually the other teams that I played against, because I never, like, playing youth football, I never, like, got any comments from the other boys or that I was playing against, like, oh, you shouldn't be playing. You know, like, I'm just part of the team, part of the opposing team. Like, a lot of those guys that I played with growing up on other teams, they're part of the national team now. And I never got comments from them that, oh, you shouldn't be playing. So kudos to them for that.
So it was a great experience for the most part. So you started at around 6. You would have gone through primary school and most of secondary school. Before you completed secondary school, you jet setted out of here to continue to pursue the football. What would have prompted that?
So a couple of things. I think as I kind of went through the school process of secondary school, you know, we were very focused on CXCs and how many CXCs you do, and you need CXCs to be able to go to UV or to be able to get a job and stuff like that. And I think the more I thought about it, when I was looking at what was offered here for me to study, nothing really was like, oh yeah, like I would love to do that. Like, you know, the route of being a doctor, being a lawyer, those are the more common ones. Then maybe becoming an accountant, those type of things. And it never really stuck out to me as something that I wanted to do. So that was kind of the first, I guess, shift there. And then someone had come down from the US and they had offered the opportunity for some of us to go up to do a little trial. So I went up with Alyssa and Gabby, and they're older than I am. So they were at a different stage of their secondary school education. And they're like, oh, like, we like you, like, we think you would have a good chance of getting a scholarship. But the only thing is that, like, Barbados is kind of on the British educational system. The US system is slightly different. So even though your grades are really good, like, when you, like, they look at a transcript, they may think that, oh, you're not as good of a student, obviously, because our educational system is not as
different.
It's slightly different. So they're like, it may be best for you to come up here. And at that time too, which is, I was looking through some reports recently, I think I had missed probably, if you equate it, probably about 6-8 weeks of school, because I would go up like every term, maybe I would go, or every like couple of months I would go out to playing tournaments. So like I was about to go into fifth form. So obviously that would not have flown as well. And then it would look bad. It probably would start to get some visits from the ministry as well, the absences. So they were like, instead of you missing school so much and having to travel so often, it would be better if you just came up and attended high school here. And then from that point, we could try to get you a scholarship, and it would be a lot easier than trying to transfer grades and all of that fun stuff. So that was how that conversation started. And then, so one time when I went up on a tournament, I visited some schools. I fell in love with one. And then one of the girls that I played with, club level, she went to the school and they had a scholarship as well. So it just worked out really well. And I was able to then leave at the end of fourth form year. It was a very quick process. I remember, I think the tournament I went up to was in August. And like those 2 weeks, we had to get my F1 visa. We had to get everything sorted. And then school, obviously, here was starting to begin in September. So it was a very quick process. Remember, my friends, I don't even think I was able to tell my friends that I was leaving until like I went the first day of school and just was like, bye. And then that was it. So that was a really fast process, but a lot of thought went into it.
How did it feel though at the end of fourth form, going off to the US by yourself? How did you cope?
To be honest, those 2 years they were highlights, and then there were not so great highlights, because so I lived with a host family my first year, which, like, thinking about like today, like that was a great faith that my parents had, allowing me to, and it was a white host family. So a lot of cultural things that were different, but at the time, you know, we were so open to the opportunity that was in front of me, and it was a Christian school, and it was, you know, it worked really well, and that somebody would be willing to kind of open their home to me. So on that end, it went well. And then there were some cultural things. There were some, again, I feel like because I'm so sometimes very glued, a lot of things go over my head. So
until after the fact,
and then you talk to my parents and stuff. And when I left, I was 15. So there's some things, obviously there's still some growing up to do. So I remember when I first went there, and as I said, it was a white family and it was a small school. First week or so, like, they put me into certain classes, and I was like, it was too easy. So then the guidance counselor like, we need to shift you. So I remember bringing home my slip saying, you know, like, this is my new timetable. I was like, honors this, honors that. And they were like, are you sure? You know, so it was just like, at that point, I didn't think anything of it. But then, you know, like, you think maybe it was a bit racist because it was from where I came from. I came from an island, and, you know, it was Black, and they would expect me to be
that intelligent
as well. Classes. So like, there were things like that. And then obviously I was playing clubs. Football in the US is a lot different than here. So it's where, like, you would go to practice maybe twice a week, but it would probably like down the road. So it'd take like 10, 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes to get there. But where I would train, it would be sometimes like an hour and a half drive after school. So I wasn't really spending a lot of time with them. And there were issues that came up from that. They felt like, oh, like I don't know. So then that didn't work out. So at the end of that, my first year, so that would have been my junior, and I actually skipped a grade. So when I first went in, I should have been in 10th grade. And then they moved me to 11th grade. So I ended up kind of moving on a little earlier. So that didn't work out. And the next year I stayed with a Jamaican guy. Actually, he was one of the chair of the club. Okay. So obviously had a lot more in common, so we could eat the same food, and, you know, he understood where I was coming from a little better. And then actually my second year, Gabby actually moved in with us because she moved to Temple. So that was a little better dynamic. But that first year I was ready to come home. My mother could tell you I cried a lot. I was ready to come home, but I'm glad that I stuck it out, and it really paid off. Just yeah.
Because you ended up then on the college scene.
Yes.
And how was that college experience? Like 4 years of playing football, soccer, they call it in the collegiate system overseas.
Yeah.
That's not to be taken lightly, especially at that level.
Yeah. So I wasn't even looking at Purdue, which I think makes that story so much more beautiful in a sense, if I want to put it like that. I think that's like one of the proudest things that I've done in my life is going to Purdue and graduating. Again, it wasn't all easy. So they saw me at a tournament, and then they offered me a scholarship. That was probably the last place I visited. I visited and actually fell in love with the athletic advisor. So if anybody familiar with the NCAA scene, you have your like academic advisor, which is like all academics, and then you have somebody on the athletic side who makes sure that you're eligible on the academic side and the athletic side to keep playing. So she was who I met with when I went to tour, and she was just amazing. She made me feel like it was about me as a person and not me as a footballer, which I think for anybody listening that looking to go to school, I think that's very important, because I remember when I was looking to go to school, I was looking at location and type urban versus suburban and like all those different things, which they matter, but at the end of the day, you as a person have to be comfortable where you go. That actually ended up, it was the reason that I was able to graduate, because I had a lot of injuries. I had a groin injury my first 2 years, and we couldn't figure out what it was. And it took me to the summer of my sophomore year to figure out what it was and get surgery. So those first 2 years were really rough. And because I was on a full scholarship, I was very worried about my status, whether it was going to get renewed or not. So again, that was a lot of tears. My athletic advisor saw me in her office a lot, but she was just that person that I could go to as a person and share my concerns, and she would listen, and then she would give you a big hug, and she had this candy drawer and stuff. So
reassure you that it would all be okay.
Yes, that was all okay. So on that side, that was hard. But in terms of the playing side, again, that was another adjustment, because like I always try to tell the parents that I deal with, like, for instance, common entrance. Common entrance comes up, and we pull the children out to exams. Out to everything. Out of sports, and we just want to focus on the exam. Like, that doesn't work at the college scene, because you have to be able to manage academics, and then you have to be able to manage athletics. And then not even just that, because I was injured a lot, you had to go to rehab hours, recovery room, and then you have to manage when you're going to eat, and then you got to manage travel. I remember my freshman year, I think it was our first road trip. We went somewhere, and I think we got back at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And because you're a freshman, most of your first classes are 7 o'clock in the morning. Not even 7 o'clock in the morning. So you coming back. I remember some people had exams, some people had tests that day. So that was just an awakening. So that was what it was like. And I remember too, we had a class at the end of campus, and you had to get to practice in like on the other end and in like 20 minutes. And coach is not happy to say, okay, are you coming from class? And he want to start his practice on time. So if you're late, and then again, if you're injured, you got to go to the training room before you come out to practice, because you got to get taped, you got to get stretched, you got to do all sort of other things. So that was interesting, balancing that. And then where I went was the middle of Midwest. So it was nice and cold and freezing. So that was another adjustment. Like, when I first moved from Barbados to finish high school, I went to Philadelphia, which was cold. And I was like, I'm not going anywhere cold. Then I ended up at Purdue.
And they ended up at Purdue.
And then that was freezing. I remember playing some games, and my toes would be completely frozen. I had to work with my athletic trainer to figure out how we had to put heat warmers. Yeah, heat warmers in my boots. And so that was an experience. And then, so graduating from that was just, I could look back and say, I've definitely made it through. We didn't make it to any playoff tournaments, but, being able to score a couple of goals and to make an impact on that level, that was definitely something. And I mean, Purdue is a Big Ten school, so it wasn't a small program that I went to. So, yeah.
So from primary school, secondary school, high school, college, after all of this, what does Soraya do now? So after the collegiate career, where do we find Soraya now?
So when I was finishing up, I thought I wanted to be a chiropractor. So my last 2 years of my undergrad, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a chiropractor. But then I did an internship. I think it was the last summer of my I think it was the last summer with the athletic department, and it was in leadership development. I was like, oh, this is pretty nice. I like this part of it, working with people and helping them to develop and excel. So I was like, oh, maybe that's what I want to go into. So then I kind of shifted more to sports administration. So I started to look for master's programs that kind of were along that line. But most of those started, I think I actually ended school in December. So I graduated half semester early, or semester early. So I graduated in December. So I actually would have had like those extra months in between because the program would have started in August. Yeah. So I came back to Barbados and I actually worked with the BFA for a couple months. At the time, Falopa was here, so I assisted him, technical assistant to him, and I assisted him for a couple months, and then I went off to do my master's, and that was about a 2-year program, but it was like a year and a half of actual school. So that's what I ended up doing right after my undergrad.
Right after your undergrad.
Yeah.
So we've done the sports management type side of things. You're now working in sports in the Bahamas. How did that come about? Actually, tell us what you do in the Bahamas first, and then tell us how did that come about.
Okay, so I am the director of women's football development in the Bahamas with their football association, also the BFA, Bahamas FA. We'll say to make sure we clear. How did that come about? So I'd say come about by God, because nothing. I didn't apply for anything. I did. So my second spell at the BFA here in Barbados FA, I did with a program through FIFA and the CIS at UE in Trinidad. It was a football executive program. So it's myself and the general secretary from Barbados that went, and then like some of the other associations in the Caribbean also sent like their general secretaries and some other persons. So I would have met obviously a lot of people from within football in the Caribbean through that program. Yeah, networking. Yeah, definitely. Didn't think about it at the time, but that is exactly what it was. And then so the Deputy General Secretary from the Bahamas FA was on that program. So we obviously would have met through the coursework and stuff. But this is like that was 2018. I think that was 2018 or 2019. I can't remember when it ended. But that was a good 3 years, 2.5, 3 years since then. And I was working on my program here in Barbados, and because I left the BFA, Barbados FA, and I was working on my program here. And I guess Bahamas FA, they were looking for someone for the position. They actually had hired someone, but didn't work out. So they're looking for somebody new. They were looking for somebody from the Caribbean that they thought could come in and understand their environment a little better. So he reached out to me, actually on IG, funny enough.
Really?
Got this random IG message one day, and I opened it, responded, and then they're like, oh, would you be interested? So they went on like an information call, and then from there, it just came out about from that. So that's why I say it's God. So there's nothing that I applied for. It's minding my own business. Just got this message, and that's how that came about.
So, Soraya, as a Barbados lady trading, how does one separate when you put on the Barbados colors and probably go play against the Bahamas? What can happen there?
Well, that's real easy. Ain't nothing to separate. Ain't nothing to separate. I'm Bajan to the bone, so that comes first. But they understand.
They understand.
They would have to understand, but
because you're still wearing colors. You're still wearing the Barbados colors.
Hopefully, it doesn't come to that.
Fair.
Hopefully, it doesn't come to that, but. I would definitely make sure the right people are in place to make sure the Bahamas has a good showing as well. Because I do, I have become fond of, the program over there, and there's some really good people working over there. So I want to just show them to the world. But Barbados always comes first in my heart. Yes.
Hear that, Mario Heart? Barbados comes first. All right. So you also have a nonprofit.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
All right, Soraya 34 Sports Inc. I started that in 2017. So actually, the thought about that came about when I was doing my master's. Again, as I went from kind of chiropractor to then sports administration, and then it went to more like nonprofit based, development based. I actually thought I wanted to work with like Special Olympics type first. And then I was like, you know what, like I benefited so much from people pouring into my life because a lot of opportunities that I had didn't come out just because I was so great and I did all these amazing things. Like from the time I started at Pro Shotters, like I was on scholarship. So I had a lot of people from that young just like pouring into my life. So I wanted to create something where I could do that for young people here in Barbados, because I believe that, especially when it came to sports, that we don't use it enough to reach young people. And I think there's a lot of power in sports. In my case, it's definitely football. Like I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for football. Like my background here, like I have family that lives, we want to call the ghetto. I have family that lives in what you want to call,
Nice.
in the heights and terraces, if you want to call it like that. But football for me, it just unifies everybody. It doesn't matter where you come from. And for somebody from where, like my background, to be able to go, like I went to Russia for the World Cup, I went to France for the World Cup. I actually got to play at Manchester United when I was 8. Just by chance, because I went with my brother, but I ended up getting the opportunity to play. But so like for me, football has just opened up so many doors for me, and I wanted to create an opportunity to do the same for young people, whether it was football or other sports. Or then, so that's how that first started in 2017. And then right now it's evolving, so it's always evolving. That's kind of like my way of working with it. Is it always evolves. Like we had. When we started to actually get really busy was 2020, and then we had the pandemic, and
slow down.
They had to change what we were doing, because our main program right now is the More Than Boots program, which is a girls football program. So the reason that I created that program in Rare 34 Sports Inc. is that's what we discussed earlier. And funny enough, much hasn't changed. You're not going to find youth programs for girls where it's just girls. They still have to play with boys if they want to learn to play football in Barbados, which nothing is wrong with that, because that's how I grew up playing, and it's fine. But there are some girls where that environment is not comfortable, it's not inviting for them. Exactly. They're timid, it's intimidating. Some of the boys aren't as nice as the boys maybe that I had, maybe because I was as good, it didn't bother me. But for a girl, and it's also for parents, some parents are a little bit more protective of their daughters. So if you say, oh, you're gonna let them play with boys, like, I ain't too sure about that. Rough. But if you say, oh, no, it's just girls, then they're a little bit, that fear and that caution kind of takes a step back. So I thought, like this would be a good program that we could put out. And then at the time I also read, childhood obesity is increasing in Barbados. I think it's like 3 out of 5 or something young people. And then in girls it's even worse, because girls tend to be the ones inside versus the boys outside running around. And sometimes that's societal as well, because the parents don't want the girls outside getting sweaty. Yeah, exactly. So that was also a part of the program why we created it. Initially, we went into the schools. We had 5-6 schools that we were working with, but then again, the pandemic. So we had 90 girls when we first started, and we actually had the support of the U.S. Embassy. So it was going really well. Then the pandemic came around. We had to shift. We went online. So right now we have about 15 or so girls in our program. We like to call it More Than Boots family. We're a 34 family, because that's the environment that we try to instill in them. But it's more than football. It's about also teaching them life skills. It's about teaching them confidence. It's about representation. So we actually have a few lady tridents that coach them. So shout out to Shanice and Ashley and Tiffany.
For sure. Yeah. I saw them. They came around to some of our games during the season. I hear them on the line.
Yeah.
Go Shanice! Go Ashley! Yeah. It was beautiful.
They love them. And so that's our organic part of the program that came out. And it just came out like our motto for the More Than Boots program is see it, be it. So they get to see it in their coaches, and then the coaches come back and they work with them, and they get to, they can respect them a little bit more because they get to actually see them playing. So I'm glad that they had the Republic Women's Super League, that they could actually go out and watch a couple of games and support. They got to walk out. Some of them got to walk out for the finals. So those are experiences that we didn't have growing up, which I think they go a long way to keep them engaged and to keep them inspired. So so that's what that program is about. And I think, it's coming along well, looking to hopefully grow it, trying to get back into schools. Because ideally we want to reach those in socioeconomic environments where the parents don't necessarily, they can't bring them out because they're working or they're doing other things. So we want to be able to get back into those communities where we can reach those young girls, and then hopefully one day maybe shift it to boys as well. But that would encourage resources.
I just want to start and say that I believe that's a very beautiful thing that you're doing. Imagine being at that age and your coach is Barbados top women's scorer. You understand? Your coach is the vice captain of the Lady Tridents team. That is, as you said, see it, be it. It is very aspiring to look forward to. That is very great that you have decided to create this safe space for those young ladies.
Thanks.
I tell you, they enjoyed every game they came to. They were cheering and everything. So to wrap up now, what I would like for you to do is give some advice to your Rare 34 Sports Inc. girls. What advice would you have for them coming up as young female footballers in Barbados?
Well, my advice to them wouldn't just be as young female footballers, just as young women, is to believe in themselves. Don't ever let anybody put a cap on what they're capable of achieving, because I know it's cliche, the sky is the limit, but I believe you can actually go above that, because sometimes we like to think the opportunities are what we can see. You can see the sky, but you can't see what's above it. And I think you have to be open to those opportunities, because I would not have been where I am if I wasn't open to what came beyond what I thought I wanted. So that's just what I would tell them, just to believe in themselves, keep dreaming, and don't let anybody ever put a limit on who they can be or what they can achieve.
Don't let anybody put a limit on who you are or what you can achieve. And on that note, we're going to sign out. See you later.